Hi, I'm Ashley, and I help people to speak the way they've always wanted to speak. One of the things that I help people with is pronunciation, particularly pronunciation in a standard Southern British English accent, which falls under the umbrella of RP, or received pronunciation. I also help people with public speaking, presentation skills, breath work, and developing a richer and deeper voice. So if you're more interested in those things, there's a link to my website in the description box below. Otherwise, let's get started. So today's lesson is all about the pronunciation of the NG spelling, particularly at the end of words, but not exclusively. Now, the thing to get really interested in here is that there are sort of two instances, or maybe, well, there's three instances where you tend to see NG spellings in words. One is in the middle of a word. The other is at the end of a word when it's part of the root word. I won't go into the details of that. It's basically a word that you can't take anything off it. It is just the word itself. So, for example, song is a root word. You can't take anything away from it, otherwise you're not left with the word itself. But also NG as part of an ing suffix, and that means that it's an attachment to a word. So I can have sing, that's the root word, but I can have sing, ing, laugh, ing, dance, ing. So NG's in the middle, NG's at the end as part of the root word, and ING's as a suffix. Now, NG's in the middles of words are most of the time quite simple. We're going to come back to that in a moment. We're going to deal, to begin with an NG at the end of a word, either root or as a suffix. And the simple thing to say is that in this particular accent, they do not pronounce a hard G at the ends of these words. So song, but not song. Sing, but not sing. Dancing, but not dancing. And as I've said, I think in almost all of these videos, there is nothing wrong with adding a G at the end of the word. There are many accents that do that, and long live variety in pronunciation. But if you want to sound this particular way, for whatever reason, then this is the way to do it. So if you're going to avoid that G sound, if indeed that's what you do, or maybe a slightly softer version of that, so some people add actually something a bit more like a K at the end, so song, sing. So to avoid either of those two things, you need to focus on what you're doing in the lead up to that. Right? Because actually what you do in the lead up to it is exactly the same as what speakers of this accent do. They just don't change it, right? So when you say the word song, you may not notice this, but the back of your tongue is coming up in the back of your mouth, and then it closes against the sort of back part of your palate, what's called the uvula. So it sounds something like song. Now, what you then do, maybe, is that you go song, and you bring the back of your tongue down. That's when we hear the G or the K sound, what I call a hard G. If you don't want to do that, then the way to avoid that is to keep the back of the tongue there and just let the sound fade, almost like you're turning the dial down on a speaker. So for example, song, song, and nothing in the back there in your mouth changes. There's no movement. Song. It just kind of fades out. Now, when you're practicing, of course, you've got all the time in the world to leisurely come off the volume of that. But when you're speaking in live speech, you'll need to practice quite a lot in order to do that very quickly, so that you could just say song, song. And that's going to take a little bit of practice. So that's the first thing to say. When you have an ing, there are speakers who tend actually not to pronounce the ng at all. And what they do is they replace it, they substitute it with an n. Right? Now the difference between an ng and an n is what's going on with your tongue. For an NG, the back of the tongue is rising. So if you say song or sing, then you'll notice that that's what you do. However, when you get a word like dancing, you might not be going dancing with the back of the tongue. You might be bringing the tip of the tongue up and saying dancing. Tip of the tongue comes up. Remember, it's not wrong to do that. It's just that if you wanted to change it, this is how you would do it. So we basically need to try and remember what we did in a word like song and repeat it at the end of dancing, laughing, because it is the same movement. Just have a go at that. So it goes laughing, and the back of the tongue goes up. Dancing, back of the tongue goes up. So here are some words that you can practice for this. So just copy me. Sing, long, gong, thing, and some ing suffix words. Laughing, emailing, calling, texting. So we'll do some sentences around that in a moment, but let's just spend 2 seconds thinking about NGs in the middles of words, because most of the time, when it's in the middle of a word, the G is spoken. For example, hunger, finger, ingredient. So when you get an NG in the middle of a word, in this accent, it's typically pronounced with an NG followed by a G sound. But there is a little bit of an exception around this, and it's only a tiny, tiny group of words that this affects. But when you have a verb or a noun whose root ending is an NG, so for example, song or sing, when you have a suffix after it, so do you remember the ing was a suffix, but there are other suffixes like s's or ers or many other things. When you have a suffix after it, and the suffix it has a vowel at the beginning of it, like the I in an ing, or the er is a vowel, right? So singer, singing, the G isn't pronounced, right? So if I said sing, the G isn't pronounced, but when I say singer or singing, the G is still not pronounced, even though it's in the middle of a word. So when you get an NG in the middle of a word, it's in the majority of instances, the NG is pronounced with a G, with a hard G, yeah, finger, anger. But when it's at the end of a root verb or noun, and you can add a suffix that begins with a vowel after it, like an ER or like an ING, the G is not pronounced, even though it's in the middle of a word. It's worth mentioning I have a free British English pronunciation course, which I'll detail at the end of this video. So here are some sentences to practice with. I've been asking Andrew to clarify the emailing and filing policies for months. Wearing lycra and dancing madly is not something I feel comfortable doing in public. We walked along the river in Kettering on Sunday, and it was snowing like mad. They rang every hour yesterday. I'm going crazy. It's alarming. It's infuriating. Hope you found that helpful. Remember, I've got a free British English accent pronunciation course, and the link to that is in the description box below. It's got everything you could ever want to know about British English pronunciation. Remember, I also offer many other services like public speaking, presentation skills, breath work, and how to develop a deeper and richer and stronger voice. So if you're more interested in those, there's a link to my website in the description box below. Otherwise, I hope you subscribe so that you can get my videos regularly, and I hope to see you very, very soon.